For a party that was nominally established in 2018, Nigel Farage's Reform UK has done remarkably well. It's gone from having no representation in Parliament to having 5 MPs, and since the local elections this year, has also secured almost 1,000 councillors in local government across the country. Perhaps, though, its biggest success is its standing in the national polls. Since the 2024 general election, Reform had increased its national polling so much that, by March, they'd overtaken both the Conservatives and Labour, and were, for the first time, out in front. While they're still the most popular party in the country, since March their polling has actually stalled and even begun to drop slightly, leading some to ask whether Reform has hit their polling ceiling, their theoretical maximum standing in the polls. So, in this video, we're going to have a look into this and figure out whether Reform has already peaked. We've just released a new coffee table book called Assembly Required, which runs through the stories behind some of the world's most beautiful parliament buildings. It's 300 pages long, features hundreds of photos as well as custom designed floor plans and maps, all alongside the stories of each building written by our team. Find out more and pick up a copy by clicking the link in the description. Now, it's worth starting the video by having a look at exactly where Reform are in the polls. It seems that pollsters are in agreement that Reform are averaging roughly 30% at the moment, giving them around a 10-point lead over Labour. However, Reform has been on around 30% since about June, and it looks as though their polling surge has stalled and actually declined slightly. So, what gives? Well, while Farage is a popular politician, according to YouGov he's actually the most popular politician in the UK, there are factors working against him. Farage is a deeply polarising figure, and while he does have the highest number of people say that they have a very favourable opinion of him, he also has the highest number of people that have a very unfavourable opinion of him too, at least among senior British politicians. Given that Reform's polling is inextricably linked to their populist leader, it should be unsurprising that Farage's popularity seems to limit who Reform can reach. A recent YouGov poll asked people to rank on a scale of 0 to 10 how likely they'd be to consider voting for each of the UK parties. They found that 51% of people said 0 out of 10 for Reform, significantly more than any other party. The party with the second most people saying 0 is Labour, with 41%. What this means is that at least half the electorate is effectively off limits to Reform, because they dislike the party so much they can't see a world in which they would even consider voting for them. To make matters worse, the same polling found that only 27% of the public have suggested that they would consider voting Reform, i.e. gave an answer between 6 and 10. This is a problem for Reform, as the latest YouGov voter intention poll suggests that 26% of voters would vote Reform if there was an election tomorrow. What this means is there isn't really anywhere for them to go. They're already pretty much at their vote ceiling, as there's only a 1% gap between those that would vote for them and those that would consider voting for them. This isn't the case for the other parties. For Labour, the gap is 6 percentage points. For the Tories, it's 10 percentage points, and for the Lib Dems and Greens, it's 13 percentage points. So each of these parties theoretically have room to expand. Reform doesn't. While this is, of course, just a single poll, it indicates that Reform is at, or at least near, its proverbial polling ceiling. So, why might this be the case? Well, in a poll from January, YouGov asked people who had previously said they would consider voting Reform what their biggest reservation would be. The 3 main reasons given are Reform's lack of experience governing, that they're a small party, or that a vote for them would be wasted, and a concern that they'll be the same as the rest. The issue here is that some of these aren't problems that Reform can solve. If the main reservation with Reform was, say, that they don't have a well-developed policy platform, this wouldn't be too much of a problem, as they'd likely roll out a more detailed policy platform in the run-up to the election. Reform's lack of governing experience, however, isn't something that can be rectified as easily. There are 2 ways of doing this. Firstly, they could promote experienced ex-Tory MPs that defect to Reform. This, though, would likely undermine Reform's populist credentials, and would frustrate those who want Reform to be a genuine alternative to the Tories. The second way of doing this would be to point to the success of Reform mayors and local councillors. However, already things aren't exactly going swimmingly. Around 8 Reform-led councils have announced that they'll raise council tax, and none have said that they'll cut it. And by the end of October, Reform had lost around 5% of its councillors that were elected only 6 months ago, due to defections, expulsions and resignations. So it may be a little tricky to point to the successes of councils. Now, the second issue highlighted by voters earlier in the year is that Reform is a small party, and that voting for them would be a waste. To be fair, it's hard to imagine that this is still an issue for potential voters, given Reform's sustained polling lead. The third issue highlighted by voters is concern that Reform will be the same as the other parties. Now, there are ways in which Reform could distinguish itself, either via policy or style, and there is actually a decent argument to be made that they're putting effort into differentiating themselves. Just look at their conference this year compared to Labour and the Tories. But again, their experience in local government isn't helping here. Ultimately, while it's certainly not easy to rocket up in the polls like Reform has done, growing further, or at least maintaining that position by the next election, likely 2029, is a lot harder. In the relatively short time that Reform has had a parliamentary presence, and even shorter time that it's been leading the polls, a series of scandals and incidents have been tricky for the party. Whether it's a racism scandal involving one of its MPs, allegations of racism by Nigel Farage when he was a schoolboy, or the jailing of the former Welsh Reform leader for pro-Russia bribery, the extra public scrutiny that comes with being a poll-leading prospective party of government can obviously be damaging. So, given Reform's stagnation at around 30%, it seems reasonable to suggest that it may have hit its polling peak. This would still, of course, be an impressive result for a party that was on single digits just a couple of years ago, and probably won't be much consolation for the mainstream parties, which are still languishing behind in the polls. Now, that's quite a lot of information we've thrown your way, and that's after we've simplified it down for you. So you can only imagine how overwhelming it is to sift through the hundreds of outlets reporting on it online to just find out what happened. Luckily for all of us, there's a website and app that collects all those articles and puts them all in one easy-to-access place. And that website is, you guessed it, Ground News. Not only does Ground News assemble all these articles, but it also offers a breakdown into bias distribution, factuality, and ownership of each individual source, giving you the opportunity to dive deep into the information that may have been hidden from you previously. For example, if we take this story on accusations that Farage was racist as a schoolboy, we can see that there are 54 sources currently reporting on it, with most of the coverage coming from the centre. If we use their handy bias comparison feature, we can see that the left is highlighting specific allegations, and the right is portraying it more broadly as Farage being under pressure. We can also filter and sort every story by their factuality level, helping you to easily grasp the reliability of each outlet. Or even take a more extensive look at who owns each of these outlets, keeping you fully informed on who's trying to feed you information online. Even if you want to stay close to home and explore what's being said in your area, Ground News can break down all of your local news, and even shows you stories you might have missed, introducing you to their blind spot feature. Here you can discover everything that's being disproportionately reported by one side or the other, whether it's a mile from your house or on the other side of the world. That's just scratching the surface of what Ground News has to offer. So if you're interested, there's no better time to sign up, as we're partnering with them to offer 40% off their unlimited access Vantage plan. And just in time for the holiday season, you can even gift a subscription to a friend or family member for the same 40% discount. All you have to do is subscribe through the link in the description, go to ground.news/TLDR or scan the QR code on screen, and you'll be supporting an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.